Imagine landing the absolute biggest victory of your entire life. I mean, you step up when literally everyone else is terrified. You take down a literal giant. You basically save your nation, and your reward.
Right, you'd expect a parade.
Exactly, a parade, or at least the keys to the kingdom. But instead, your mentor, the person who should be celebrating you, becomes so consumed with envy that he tries to pin you to a wall with a spear.
Yeah, it is a staggering pivot.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we're exploring a really fascinating textual analysis and theological commentary, and it's titled Faith Formed in the Furnace of Suffering.
It's a great title.
It is. And whether you approach this material as, sacred theology or historical literature or even just a profound psychological case study, the central premise is honestly just fascinating.
It really operates on all those levels.
Yeah, totally. We are unpacking the ancient historical accounts of 1 Samuel, specifically looking at the dynamic between King Saul and a young, newly anointed David. And our mission today is to figure out why going through an intensely unfair, just agonizing period of hardship might actually be the exact, quote-unquote, furnace required to forge true leadership and character.
And what the text calls righteousness, which we will definitely get into.
Oh, absolutely. So for anyone listening who has ever felt like they were doing everything right but still experiencing massive, inexplicable setbacks, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Because that furnace metaphor, it is such a visceral image. I mean, a furnace doesn't just warm things up, it melts them down.
Right, destroys things.
Exactly. It burns away every single impurity until only the most structurally sound elements remain. And to understand how that mechanism works on a human mind, we have to look at the sheer psychological whiplash of David's early life.
The whiplash is intense.
Because he experiences a peak that very few human beings can even comprehend.
Yeah, let's set that stage, because he isn't just like a successful guy. He is a teenager when he is literally anointed as the future king.
Right, a kid.
Just a kid. And then comes the famous underdog triumph. He walks out onto a battlefield facing Goliath, this terrifying, heavily armored champion, and drops him with a single smooth stone.
Which, by all accounts, should have been the moment his legacy was permanently cemented.
Yeah, you'd think so.
In any normal narrative, that victory leads directly to a coronation. But instead of an ascension, his success acts as this mirror that reflects the current ruler's deepest insecurities.
King Saul.
Right, King Saul. He hears the women of the city singing songs, celebrating David's victories, and it triggers a profound, almost paranoid envy.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the relational breakdown here is just staggering. To put this in a modern, relatable context, imagine you are a brilliant young founder, right?
Okay, yeah.
You build a startup from nothing, you secure the impossible unicorn valuation, and you essentially save the company from bankruptcy.
Adult child.
Exactly. But instead of the CEO taking you under his wing, he perceives you as a massive threat. So he orchestrates this ruthless corporate sabotage, strips you of your equity, freezes your assets, and blackballs you so completely that you're suddenly sleeping in your car.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Right. That is essentially what happens to David, but with actual physical violence. How does a person mentally reconcile going from national hero to literally hiding in the dirt?
Well, and it's much more visceral violence than just corporate sabotage. Saul's jealousy isn't just political maneuvering. He physically hurls a spear at David on 3 separate occasions.
Wow.
Yeah, twice in chapter 18 and once again in chapter 19. He literally wants him dead.
Which obviously forces David to run. I mean, he goes from being the national hero to an absolute fugitive overnight.
Yeah.
And the author emphasizes a crucial timeline detail here that I think people miss.
For 10 years.
Yes. This isn't a brief character-building weekend retreat in the woods. He is a fugitive for roughly 10 years.
That is his entire 20s.
Exactly. The prime of his life is spent starving, homeless, and terrified.
And that kind of prolonged trauma fundamentally breaks down a person's ego. The analysis points out that at one point, David is so desperate, he actually fakes insanity just to survive.
Wait, really? Like pretending to be mad?
Yes, literally letting spit run down his beard, scratching at the doors of the city gate just to survive in enemy territory so they wouldn't see him as a threat. It is the complete death of human pride.
I can't even imagine. How does a human mind endure that without snapping? You do everything perfectly, and your reward is eating dirt for a decade.
Well, the commentary references the Psalms he wrote during this exact time, specifically Psalms 54, 63, and 142.
Oh, yeah. If you read those, they are just agonizing.
They really are. He is screaming into the void, asking God why he was given this promise only to be abandoned in the wilderness.
It's raw.
But what's important is that articulating that pain, writing those psalms, was his way of processing the trauma instead of letting it destroy him. And that processing is what prepares him for the ultimate test in the dark.
Which brings us to an incredibly tense narrative pivot. Because after years of running, David is suddenly given two perfect, almost cinematic opportunities to end his nightmare.
The first scenario is almost absurd in its setup.
Yeah, the cave.
Right. David and his men are hiding deep in the shadows of a cave in the wilderness of En-Gedi. And by sheer coincidence, King Saul walks into that exact cave alone to relieve himself.
Totally vulnerable.
Completely blind to the fact that the man he has spent years hunting is standing mere feet behind him in the dark.
And David could have ended it right there. But he doesn't. He just sneaks up and cuts off a corner of Saul's robe.
Which is mind-blowing restraint.
Seriously. And then, incredibly, a similar situation happens again later in the wilderness of Ziph. This is in 1 Samuel 26. Saul is sleeping deeply, surrounded by 3,000 soldiers.
3,000.
Yeah. And David just sneaks into the camp, walks right up to a sleeping Saul, and takes the king's own spear.
And in both of these moments, David's loyal men, his closest friends, are pleading with him.
Or they are begging him.
They are telling him, look, this is a divine setup. God has delivered your abuser into your hands. Take the shot, end your suffering.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I am going to push back hard on David's response here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If all of my advisors, my friends, are telling me that God literally delivered my abuser to me to stop my suffering, I mean, I've been starving for 10 years. Isn't it almost arrogant to say no?
Arrogant.
Yeah, like, why wouldn't David just take the strategic win and end his misery? His men are suffering too. Taking him out seems like the obvious right thing to do.
It is the most logical, pragmatic question you could ask. Taking the shot is the ultimate easy way out. But David refuses.
He explicitly states he will not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed right.
Exactly, verse 23. And the core argument of the source material rests entirely on why he says no. It wasn't cowardice. It hinges entirely on a very specific, ancient understanding of what it means to be right versus being righteous.
See, this distinction is brilliant. Because in English, we use those words like they mean the exact same thing.
We use them interchangeably all the time.
But the framework here pulls them completely apart.
Right. So being quote-unquote right is strictly about objective truth. It's binary, like getting 100% on a school test or being legally flawless.
Okay.
In ancient warfare, legally speaking, David had every objective right to execute an enemy combatant who was actively trying to murder him.
Sure, self-defense.
But righteousness in this text means something totally different. The commentary defines it as right relationship.
Right relationship. I like that.
The source uses a really great analogy of a dad. A dad might not be perfect. He might make terrible dad jokes. He might lose his temper. And he might not live up to objective truth every single second of the day.
Right. No one does.
But if he faithfully fulfills his role and his responsibilities to his children, if he maintains that bond, he's considered a righteous father.
Okay, so applied to David sparing Saul, it wasn't about the legalities of war. It was about maintaining his right relationship with God's authority.
Precisely. Killing Saul would have been playing God.
So what does this all mean? It's like the difference between following the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
You can be technically right by removing a toxic leader, but relationally wrong because you destroyed your own integrity to do it. You took matters into your own hands.
And if righteousness is defined as a relationship, then suffering is the furnace that tests and solidifies that relationship.
Which leads us into the exact tangible benefits that this suffering produces.
Yes. The source argues that suffering forces a binary choice on everyone. You are either going to become bitter or better.
Bitter or better. No middle ground.
Exactly. And for people of faith, choosing the furnace, choosing to become better, produces 5 distinct fruits.
Okay, let's go through these. What's the first fruit?
The first is righteous courage. Think about it. The aggressor, Saul, has all the power, but he is terrified because God has left him.
He's paranoid.
Meanwhile, the victim, David, becomes incredibly bold because true courage is fearing only God, which makes human enemies practically powerless.
Right, if you only fear God, you don't fear the guy with the spear. That makes sense. What's the second fruit?
Righteous company, because courage is contagious.
Oh, I love this part.
What's fascinating here is the sheer irony of the numbers. Saul has 3,000 heavily armed soldiers sleeping around him. Yet not a single one is brave enough or loyal enough to wake up and fetch that stolen spear.
They're just there for the paycheck.
Exactly. But David gains 400 followers in the wilderness. And these were people who were distressed, in debt, and bitter in soul. Outcasts.
But they become fiercely loyal to him.
Very loyal. He also gains a true friend in Jonathan, Saul's own son.
Wow. Okay, so that's courage and company. Number 3.
Righteous confidence. This basically means keeping a clear conscience. The text cites a story in 1 Samuel 25 about a woman named Abigail.
Right. She warns David not to kill a guy named Nabal.
Yes, Nabal insults David, and David is ready for revenge. But Abigail stops him, warning him that when he becomes king, he won't want to be haunted by the regret of a petty murder.
So she saves his conscience.
Exactly. Which brings us to the 4th fruit, righteous concentration. The author compares suffering to looking through a telescope.
Okay, I really want to hone in on this telescope analogy.
Right.
Because usually when we are in a crisis, we pick up that telescope and we are frantically scanning the horizon for an escape hatch, right?
Or we focus it entirely on the person hurting us.
Exactly. We obsess over the person causing our pain. But the radical idea here is that the telescope isn't meant to find the exit. It narrows your focus, so you only see God as your deliverer.
Yes. It forces you to stop looking at the problem and lock your vision entirely on the rescuer.
That is so powerful. Okay, and the 5th fruit.
Righteous consequences. Holding on to your integrity in the dark ultimately brings success. It culminates to the point where, in 1 Samuel 26, even Saul is forced to publicly bless David.
The guy trying to kill him actually blesses him.
Yes. The furnace produces undeniable fruit.
That is incredible. But this concept of choosing the furnace to bear ultimate fruit, it isn't just a historical anecdote about David, is it?
No, not at all. The commentary takes this entire framework and shows how it culminates in a much larger ultimate biblical parallel.
Connecting David's 10-year trial to the ultimate example of suffering in the text.
Right. The crucifixion of Jesus. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text points out a really crucial detail from the accounts in Mark 15 and Matthew 27.
Okay, what is the detail?
When Jesus was on the cross, enduring that agony for 6 hours, he was initially offered wine mixed with gall.
And just for context, that wasn't like a refreshing drink, right?
Yeah.
That was essentially a narcotic painkiller.
Exactly. It was meant to dull the agony of execution, but he refused it.
He turned down the anesthetic.
Yes. But later on, he accepts a drink of sour wine, and sour wine actually increases thirst. It acutely prolongs the physical suffering.
Wow. So he refused the painkiller, but accepted the thing that made it worse.
The text argues he chose to feel the absolute full weight of the furnace because he knew the quote-unquote righteous consequences it would yield.
I really want to question this painkiller aspect, especially today, because in our modern context, our entire society is basically built on avoiding pain.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, at the first sign of discomfort, we want the anesthetic. We want a distraction, a pill, an easy way out. What does it say about human nature that we instinctively run from the very furnace that might be required to forge us?
It says we naturally want resurrection without the death. We want the new life without the skull.
The skull.
Right. The text connects this choice to the actual location of the crucifixion, Golgotha, which literally means the place of the skull.
Right, right.
And it links that place of death to Ezekiel's famous vision of the dry bones.
Oh, where the valley of dry skeletons turns into a living army.
Exactly. Just like Ezekiel's vision, the ultimate suffering on the skull, that complete surrender to the furnace, is what brought flesh and breath and new life to the dry bones of humanity.
The furnace wasn't the end. It was the prerequisite for life.
Precisely. David's story was just the precursor to that ultimate truth.
Man, that's a lot to process.
It's heavy, but it changes how you see every hardship.
Yeah, it really does. Well, we need to bring this deep dive to a close. We have explored how an agonizing, decade-long detour for a young king wasn't a cosmic mistake, but a strictly necessary furnace.
And how hardship always creates that choice.
Yeah.
Become bitter or become better.
Right, become better through righteous courage, true companionship, a clear conscience, laser-focused concentration, and lasting fruit. So as we wrap up, we want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering question to explore on your own.
Something to mull over.
Exactly. If suffering is the ultimate filter that strips away the superficial and reveals true character, what current, seemingly unsolvable frustration in your own life might actually be the exact furnace you need right now? Could your biggest obstacle actually be the very thing building your own loyal 400 followers or forging your ultimate courage? Keep that in mind the next time you find yourself in the dark.